Hello and welcome back to the VolReport Show. I'm Ryan Sylvia with VolReport.com on the Rivals Network. And with the final week of the regular season finally here, we're talking with the one and only Chris Lee from VandySports.com on the Rivals Network. Chris, how are you doing?
Hey, good day to you and happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, thank you. You as well. To get things started, I want to talk about Vanderbilt, kind of the vibes around the program. Maybe not the season that's expected out of Vanderbilt after how they finished last year, but also the expectations for Vanderbilt different than maybe elsewhere in the SEC. First, the fan base, how have they received this season? And secondly, the locker room, from what you can tell, kind of what is the atmosphere in there?
Oh man, to set the stage, this was a season where there were expectations for a change, which at Vanderbilt is a rarity, and there were mixed signs, I guess is a good way to say it. I mean, you looked at where they finished in computer rankings last year. There was still a team that hadn't really taken much of a step. You watch them on the field, and you could see it in the spring and the fall. There were some obvious deficiencies, most notably at corner, and it's hard to win in this league when you can't cover anybody. But on the other hand, when Clark Lee took the program over, it was in awful shape. Remember, they had gone 0-4 the previous year in the SEC only. They had forfeited their final game against Georgia, or they didn't forfeit it. They were excused for COVID reasons or whatever. They had a lot of negative tests, or positive tests, but at the same time, I think there was more going on than that. And so Clark had taken the program over from a spot where it was in awful shape. I mean, as bad as Vanderbilt's been historically, they'd never gone 0 for a season in 100 and something years of playing football. And it was worse than that beneath the surface. So you reset to last year, and I apologize for the long answer, but I think
No, go ahead.
At Vanderbilt, it's usually complicated. And so last year, you look up and they're getting the doors blown off the team, and then they win those games against Kentucky and Florida. You know, like, okay, this is finally where he's starting to break through and get some confidence and trust. And then they come out this year, Ryan, and they frankly hadn't looked good in any games. Even the two that they won to start the season, you could see that there were probably going to be some issues. So, again, the bar of expectations was not high externally. Vegas set the over-under at 3.5 wins before the season. And here they are. They have covered once this year, and that was against Georgia of all people. So nobody's happy. They're probably not putting more than 6,000 or 7,000 of their own fans in their own stadium for games. The fan base has declined to the point where you just what's left are the people that are blind optimists are just really, really unhappy, and it just nothing's in a good place. I don't think that right now they have the confidence of the locker room, from what I can tell. It's just I know Tennessee's disappointed in where it is with the last 2 weeks, but Vanderbilt's in an entirely different place.
Going off of that South Carolina game, 47-6, maybe not going into it expecting to win, but against a South Carolina team that hasn't been great this year, maybe a situation where you feel like you could give them a shot. Clark Lee talked about how this bye week after that game maybe came at about the right time where they can kind of reset and try to finish this season strong. How has this team been off the bye week? Do you feel like this was kind of a nice time to have a very late bye in the season just to kind of mentally reset after how the season's gone?
Well, I mean, they say they've had a good week of practice and that maybe they're getting healthy. They did have a flu bug hit the team this week, so we'll see how that looks on Saturday. But look, I mean, what's a coach going to say at this point? I mean, I did not think they played horribly against South Carolina. It was a downpour. I get it, but that to me looked like a team that was not giving best effort. And if they're not giving best effort in a game where they probably had a shot to win better than they do in most of their SEC games, I question what 2 weeks off is going to do.
Yeah,
for Tennessee or for Vanderbilt heading into this one in a time where there's probably going to be coaching changes. Kids that got 1 foot out the door in the portal. That could be said of any program in the country probably. Can they get it together and play better? I mean, I don't think they could play much worse, but I just don't see much. If you're looking for objective reasons to optimism, there's hard to find much at this point.
Sure. Let's cut to the chase, though. A lot of people have this question. Clark Lee did not want to answer it. What's the quarterback situation? Who do you think is going to be out there to take the first snaps on Saturday?
Man, I don't know. I mean, I really don't. I could name 3 guys and make a case for any of them, and none of them would surprise me for different reasons. I think their best guy's been Ken Seals. The stats have taken a little bit of a hit lately. I don't know that I put that all on Ken Seals. I think their play calling at times has been atrocious. They don't seem to call games to win games. AJ Swan is the most talented quarterback. He was also terribly undisciplined and making some bad throws. I don't know if being on the bench for 6 weeks with, what was said to be an elbow issue. I think there was more to it than that. Does he come back? Do they catch lightning in a bottle and give them something? And Walter Taylor's been the guy who ended the game last week, and he was awful. He's just not polished as a passer. He lost a fumble, I think, in the rain late and didn't even throw a pass last week. I mean, I would think it would either be Seals or Swan, but Taylor's played a lot recently too, and I just don't know. It's not they've got issues outside quarterback too. They've got to call plays more aggressively and better to win. But if I'm guessing, I would say it's going to be Seals, but it could be Swan. It could even be Walter Taylor.
Now, is it safe to say that Will Shepherd's kind of been the bright spot of this season? Comparable numbers to last year, but one of the better receivers in the SEC, considering the pieces around him. Pretty impressive stats when you look at it: 640 yards, 8 touchdowns, along of 85 this year. How has he been?
Well, he's talented, but unfortunately, all that came early. He's a kid who's looked kind of checked out at times. There seems to be something going on behind the scenes there. I won't speculate more than that.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, he's talented. I thought he had a shot to make himself into an NFL receiver. I think the way that he has finished the season has probably rubbed the shine off that. The guy that I would watch, and he's been banged up some, is London Humphreys, who's been the state 100-meter track champion a year ago. True freshman, come in, has made some big plays. Had a long touchdown on the first series against Georgia. They've got a kid named Junior Sherrill from nearby Lipscomb Academy who's made some plays. They've got some other guys out there. I mean, look, if Shepherd shows up and plays, he's a force to be reckoned with, but it feels like it's been a minute since we've seen that.
In terms of the ground game, Cedric Alexander leading the way so far, 325 yards. Patrick Smith right behind him with 300, but no one really jumping too far off the page. You've had Jaden McGowan get some touches as well. Where's that rush attack at? Where does it need to improve?
Well, it's been poor. I think their best 2 options are true freshmen. One you mentioned, Cedric Alexander. He was the guy that looked the best in the spring. But AJ Newberry, a freshman who's gotten some reps lately, looks to me like their most talented back in terms of speed and explosiveness. He's gotten some touches lately. Hard to tell how good those guys are. Again, the play calling has been uneven. They seem to go run, pass. They can't block anybody. And just there's been, between the combination of the offensive line play being poor and the predictability of the play calling, it's hard to tell what they've got there. But the rushing attack has not been good, even against teams that weren't at the level of SEC teams. And Tennessee's got a pretty good front seven. I just think it's going to be a struggle for Vandy there.
You mentioned that offensive line. How have they been in pass protection? Tennessee earlier in this year against some weaker offensive lines caused a lot of havoc, thinking about A&M, thinking about South Carolina. Recently been a little bit tougher for them to get to the quarterback, but this feels like a game where that defensive rush can kind of get back on track.
Yeah, Bradley Ashmore, their right tackle, has been a bright spot at times. Left tackle, Junior Azebu, their starting left tackle's been hurt. They've had to play some younger guys. They've really had trouble up the middle, where Julian Hernandez, who was a guy, I wasn't going to say he was going to compete for first or second all SEC honors, but I think Phil Steele had him 3rd or 4th team. So he was a guy that's played a lot. He was a 3rd-year starting center. He's had trouble snapping the ball out of the blue. Their guards have been awful. Sometimes you can get pressure against them inside. They haven't been good anywhere. Ashmore's the guy that's been the hardest to protect, but the line has just been poor from start to finish. maybe a little better in pass blocking than run blocking, but at the same time, you don't feel super confident, giving your quarterback a 3 or 4 second pocket either, and especially not against a team that can, as you pointed out, really cause disruption and get to the passer.
On the defensive side, you look back to last year's game, 362 rushing yards for Tennessee on a rainy night in Nashville. Jalen Wright with 160 of them. True freshman at the time, Dylan Sampson with 131 of them. Jalen Wright busted an 83-yard run. Dylan Sampson busted an 80-yard run. Jabari Small busted a 52-yard run. They just really couldn't stop the run, and it led to that game getting out of hand pretty early. Clark Lee talked about it a little bit, talked about what they need to do at his presser, about what needs to change. Do you think there's any chance that there's going to be some difference in Vanderbilt's defense, that they're going to have to force Tennessee to throw the ball more? Or do you think it's going to kind of look like last year where Tennessee does what it wants on the ground?
Teams have just kind of done what they wanted to do against Vanderbilt. They can pick one or the other and just go at it. And I'll give you Wake Forest as an example. Wake Forest is a team that was not a good running team coming in, and Vanderbilt decided we're going to make them run the ball. Wake ran for 288 yards against them. They had their starting tailback out. They had 2 guys, I think, went over 100 yards. That's just kind of been the season it's been. I mean, I think they felt in the offseason that a lot of stuff could be fixed with being more assignment sound. But you probably saw that. I'm assuming you saw that game a year ago. Tennessee they got backs in the secondary, and they won one foot race after another.
Mm-hmm.
And the same with receivers when Joe Milton could hit them. The fundamental issue with them is they just don't have enough back-end speed to compete with the elite teams in the league. I know it's not Tennessee's offensive last year, but they're still going to be faster than Vandy. I don't think you have to really do a lot to beat them. I know the Joe Milton situation has been a little dicey. There's been talk of maybe seeing Nico Iamaleava, but I think if you're Tennessee, you could probably just line up and run the ball 50 or 60 times and win this one.
In terms of pass defense, how has this pass rush looked, and what has the secondary done? Doesn't sound like it's been too impressive looking at the scores and watching them on and off this year. It hasn't jumped off the page by any means, but do you expect this to you said it's kind of pick what you want to do against Vanderbilt and you'll see success, but is the pass any better than the run, or is it really just pick what you want?
Well, it's been pick what you want, but I'll give you the scenario where this could get better for them. They do have some talent back there. They've got C.J. Taylor, who I think will be hyped for this game. No, he's been hit by the flu this week, but he's been back. He's one of their better defenders, if not their best. He plays that hybrid safety linebacker position. He's been hurt and out of a lot of games. So if you get him back and healthy, they get better there. You've got Jalen Mahoney, who's been a hybrid nickel safety kind of guy for them, who's played a lot of football and has been pretty good throughout his career. He's not an elite talent, but he's a good player. He's serviceable. He can plug in probably for some other schools in this league. And at corner, where they've been really weak, the bright spot, they do have a kid named Martell Height. And starting even a really talented freshman corner in this league is usually a recipe for disaster. We've seen that at times, but he's clearly the best they've got. And I think maybe he's going to be a little healthier this week. Maybe, game 12 of the season as opposed to game 2 or 3, you get a little better performance as he's learned and had some practice time. That other corner, I'm not sure who it'll be. It could be Tyson Russell. He's been banged up. He's questionable, and Height was too. They can get after the passer occasionally. I think the guy to watch is Langston Patterson, middle linebacker, who's a really disruptive defender and would have a ton of interest if he hit the portal. He's a good young player for them, a local kid. I think they're going to have to call the defense more aggressively, take their chances. You're going to have to get to the passer if you're going to make stuff happen. And maybe you get burned anyway, but it's not like they were getting stops just playing guys straight up.
Gabe Judy Lawley played at Vanderbilt, went to BYU, found his way to Tennessee. He's played in this game before, but for the Commodores. What do you remember about him from his time over in Nashville?
He was just kind of just a guy. I was a little surprised that he landed where he did. And roles of significance now at 2 schools. He didn't really stand out to me when he was here. He was an early enrollee. Maybe that speaks to coaching. Maybe it doesn't. But I know Tennessee's in a world of hurt in its own right in the secondary with some injuries and things. And so I'm glad to see that it's ended well for Gabe and he's got some playing time. But, I think at the time that he hit the portal, if you'd said, hey, this guy's going to go play key roles for BYU and Tennessee, I would have been a little surprised by that.
Yeah, that's fair. He's come on strong here at the end, been one of the more reliable
Yeah.
guys in secondary for Tennessee, but as you said, a banged up secondary, so they haven't had necessarily a lot of options outside of him to play cornerback. Before we get out of here, I want to hear your prediction for this game. I don't need an exact score if you don't want to give me one or you don't have one yet, but how do you see this one playing out? And then is there anything Vanderbilt can kind of key on to make this a little bit more palatable, maybe, and make this a closer game than people expect?
Well, to answer your second question first, I think they're going to have to call games more aggressively on offense. They're going to have to. I think they have to throw the ball a lot more than they have. And again, they've got some guys who can make plays. If Will Shepherd shows up, he's a guy that's made a lot of plays, scored a lot of touchdowns in this league. Humphreys is a guy that even Georgia had trouble with on a play or two. There are some pieces there in the receiving room, and you've seen flashes of performance at times from Swan and Seals that show that, hey, if the stars align, everything shows up, they can be productive in the passing game. Now, they got to minimize their turnovers. And then one other thing, and this will, I'm sure, breed some jokes, but they've got a really good punter, really good punter. And I think he could play in the NFL for a bit. And he's flipping field position, pinning Tennessee back inside the 5, inside the 10. Tennessee's gotten penalized at times. You set up field position, you let Tennessee make some mistakes. That's the scenario in which they keep it close. The reality is they haven't kept games close. They've covered against the spread one time this year. And again, this was not a team with a lot of expectations. I hate to say it's a name your score game for Tennessee, but given what we've seen in recent weeks, that's kind of how it feels.
26-point spread is the one going into this one for all you bettors out there. If not giving you any gambling advice, but if there's a trend that's been happening, 26 is what Vegas sees this one going as after a 56-0 win for Tennessee a year ago. Chris, you guys do a great job over at VandySports.com. Tell people where to find you on Twitter and what you guys have coming over there.
Yeah, you can see it if you're watching. This is at Chris Lee 70. I'm not a huge Twitter guy, but I am there some. So we're doing that. Also, if you're interested in following the SEC, I've got an SEC channel, Southeastern 14, on YouTube. We cover football, baseball, and basketball from a league-wide level. If people want their info on the Vols, they're best to go to you guys and other people on that beat. There's a lot of good ones. If you're looking for a good 30,000-foot view of the league in terms of what everybody's doing, I think we do a pretty good job there. So we do follow the rest of the league heavily. So those are some places that you can find our work.
And basketball coming up, of course. Tennessee and Vanderbilt got a little heated last year with the buzzer beater for Vandy. Baseball always a fun time as well when those two meet, especially now that that's one of the permanent rivals coming up too. So that should be fun for the future. So make sure you guys go ahead and check out Chris and all of his work. Thanks for joining me. Make sure you head over to VolReport.com for all of your content on Tennessee. Links to everything you need is in the description. And thank you for watching.